Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Great show today. We got John Garcia Jr. coming on to talk about recruiting, a new 24 commit, quarterback news. Do we have our quarterback now? I think we might. We're going to talk about all of that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. We're here for you, your team, every single day. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On, and you get your first deposit doubled up to $100. And we're going to get right into it. We got John Garcia Jr., Sports Illustrated recruiting director, Locked On College Football Recruiting Insider, joining the show. Always stoked for John Garcia to join the show.
Always good to be on with you, my friend. How's it going?
It's good, man. And especially, we actually have some, not that we don't always have amazing things to talk about, but we have a commit. We have some quarterback movement that we've talked about. So yeah. I'm stoked for this one. I want to start here. 2024 Wisconsin Badgers football got on the board with Austin Alexander, their first 24 commit, cornerback out of Illinois. What can you tell us about his game, and what are your thoughts on kind of this early commitment?
I just love the approach from Wisconsin, right? You're going into Illinois. Let's first identify, invite, and offer a kid who doesn't have any offers, right? Let's allow this current season's tape to dictate what we're going to do in the class of 24. To me, it shows, just from a staff perspective, that there's so much confidence in sticking around. There's so much confidence in let's just operate as if everything's the same. So I love that, and prioritizing, kids even outside of the state thus far in 2024. And look, Alexander's got some interesting tools attached to his name, right? 3-sport kid, 6'1", defensive back, plays corner, plays some overhang nickel and safety on Friday nights, impacts the football at all three of those positions. Really instinctual kid, a kid who, the technique is going to come. The size will come, just a junior at this point in high school, but the instincts, man, when he turns and runs, when the football's in the air, when he's in close quarters with a wide receiver, it looks the part. It looks how it's supposed to look. So I really like that element of this offer initially for Wisconsin. And then again, doubling down on it and saying, hey, come up to Camp Randall and you've got the green light. So the kid jumps on, which is, shows a lot on his end as well. He jumps on and he's good, with the first offer. Just not something we always see, but it always, when it does happen, it always comes from these confident coaching staffs that just kind of know who they are. And I think, again, right now with Wisconsin, especially defensively, you know who you are. You go target your guys and go get them. Even in the class of 24, again, I like the confidence that shows optically. And then in terms of the kid, he's one that's going to have 15, 20 offers before it's all said and done. Now every school is going to call and say, hey, I know you just committed, but, school X is here, and we'd like to get in this conversation as well. Maybe you come take a visit. So it'll be a recruitment to watch here in the next year or so, just relative to other schools getting in the mix. But I love, again, how Wisconsin operates with, hey, we see him, our gut says yes, let's make that green light happen thereafter, and boom, it pays off with I believe, the first commitment in 2024, which is a big deal.
I want to ask you this, because I've had this, one of the areas Wisconsin has struggled with historically the most is recruiting elite cornerbacks, elite defensive backs, right? They've been solid there, but it almost feels like you have to either, if you're Wisconsin, you're not going to get that 5-star, 6'1" kid from Florida, from Texas, from California. So you almost either need to punt a little bit on the technique and bring in rawer guys that have the physical size and tools, or you're getting the technique guys that are 5'10" and run like a 4.55. So I really like this approach, getting a guy who's maybe a little more raw, but you said 3-sport guy, plays all over the field, but he is 6'1", he's long-armed, and he can run.
100%. That's the game, right? And you talk about the cornerback position today, that's where it starts, right? Look at the NFL, whether you look at the draft, right? Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, these long, lighter corners that, yeah, the technique still has room to go here, but the results speak for themselves. Even the best corners in the league, right? Or at least the most productive, your Trevon Diggses of the world, just incredibly long players that attack the football. So yeah, you're going to give up yards and you're not going to win leverage as much as you'd like with a Darrelle Revis or a 5'10" type of corner. But when the ball's in the air and the back shoulder balls are being contested, you've got a better opportunity to make a play on it at 6'1" with great long arms. And that's what the game has become, right? It's a give and take. We'll give up the yards, but when the ball's in the air in the red zone and on third down, we're going to have a better opportunity to make a play on the football. So he fits right into that mold, Alexander does, of just this new modern cornerback where, yeah, we're taking wide receivers and flipping them over. We're taking basketball players and flipping them over and saying, hey, we know the technique's not there yet, but let us do our jobs as coaches and bring that along as much as we can. Because at a minimum, we know when the ball's in the air, you're going to have as good a chance as that wide receiver to come down with it. So it's really, again, more of a self-awareness combined with a confidence to say, yeah, we can go bring you that stuff that is taught, but you bring something that can't be taught that is really important at this position. So, yeah, I think this fits right in along the lines of modernizing Wisconsin across the board. We always talk about it on offense, right, which is easier to talk about relative to the production, but you got to modernize everywhere in this day and age. And at corner, there is no doubt, Ryan, it's got to be 6 foot plus, and more importantly than the height, length, great long arms and ball skills. Those are the top 2 traits we're talking about with corners now. It used to be hips, speed, quickness, fundamentals, and now it's the total opposite: long, lean ball skills with length.
Yeah, he checks those boxes without a doubt. I want to continue talking Alexander a little bit, but also just talk about where he's from. We saw in last year's class, well, this year's current class, I should say, 5 Illinois kids have committed to Wisconsin so far. The first one in the class, Tyler Jancy, was an Illinois kid. And now we're seeing, another Illinois player in 24. We talked about Illinois, the state itself, recruiting and how there's just a lot of prospects there. Oh, Notre Dame can't take them all, right? Michigan can't take them all.
Yeah.
Is this something you continue seeing for Wisconsin going forward potentially?
It's got to be, right? I mean, the proximity is, I mean, you educated me. The proximity there really screams positivity for Wisconsin. And like you said, Notre Dame has owned the Chicagoland area, but they can't all go there. Notre Dame recruits nationally. And even with the rise of Illinois as a program, particularly on defense, same deal. They can't all end up there. So you've got to continue to battle these schools for these prospects. And again, trusting your gut, early evaluations and all that is going to play such an important role for any school recruiting any out-of-state region. That's part of the formula, right? Let's get in before the local school, even before Northwestern jumps in, before Illinois jumps in, before anyone else jumps in, the Salukis or the Huskies included there in Illinois. Let's jump in first if we feel like this could be one of our guys. Let's not wait it out. Let's be the aggressor. Let's initiate the conversation with some of these kids in recruiting. And I think Alexander's going to be a great case study in that, especially because now you expect Illinois to retain more guys in state going forward. And you expect Notre Dame to continue to have its success in the area on top of that, both programs, particularly on defense. So I think that's going to be an interesting and fun case study to look at here going forward. But yeah, Illinois is underrated. I've caught myself digging into prospects in that state more over the last year or two than the previous 5 combined, I would say. So there's clearly an increased talent level there in the state, and other schools are starting to recognize that. So why not have Wisconsin be one of those that continue to benefit from it, right? Because you can't recruit home like you could at some of these other programs. So naturally, you should be first and foremost with some of those recruits. And I think that's a great formula to stick to, again, if there's a conviction behind a scholarship offer and eventually a green light to make a verbal commitment.
And certainly I would imagine if you're going a year in advance, going to a 24 kid, that conviction's there. Like that's not a guy you're trying to fill out a recruiting class with. That's one of your anchor players. I want to talk about in the last time we talked about Wisconsin had 0 decommits, and that's kind of a sign of the confidence in the program, the culture, but also the coaching staff. Well, now Wisconsin's +1 really on the commitment trail since Paul Chryst is gone. To me, but I'm curious, to me, that shows a sign of confidence in the assistants and the coaching staff probably staying mostly intact. But from your perspective, from a national perspective, is that the same type of read that you have on that?
It is. Again, I think, of these jobs that are open, and now Auburn is the newest, there's certain culture cachets that come with it, but that can't stand alone for recruiting, right? Because these are teenagers, right? These kids have to go experience it themselves if you're going to lean on that culture, right? So if you're Nebraska, if you're Auburn, you say, hey, look, we sell out our games and it's great and it's live and all that. Cool. Let's go visit and see. Okay, cool. That box is checked. But it's got to come from the other side. It's got to come from the current coaches, the current players, the current recruits on board. That group has to kind of fall in line with that same expectation and culture and all of that. And that's why I think you see more success with programs like Wisconsin going through a transition than some of these others, right? Nebraska's down on the commitment list. Auburn is down, I think, 3 on the commitment list at this point as of this morning. It's just not as easy a sell through a transition like it is to me at Wisconsin. And a lot of that confidence is coming from Jim Leonard. It's coming from the assistant coaches that are recruiting these kids, as opposed to at Auburn, the head coach, the interim head coach is Cadillac Williams. If you want to feel old, it's Cadillac Williams.
That does it for me, by the way.
And he, it was I saw on Twitter, he's like addressing the team, and he's like, I don't even know if we'll be here or if we'll win any game the rest of the way, but we're going to work our tail off and coach speak. But you're not hearing that on the front end at Wisconsin, at some of these other programs. So I do think that all that trickles down to recruiting. So you expect Wisconsin to be able to follow through with some of these, not promises, but some of these indicators of sticking around. And I think the tangible results of 0 decommitments and adding 1 commitment, maybe another one here along the way here soon, all of that stuff is in line with that culture and that perception that is always strong up there.
Yeah, that's great stuff as always. Coming up, we're going to keep John on the show. There is a 2023 prospect. I can't wait to talk about that. Finally got an offer. It may solve one of the bigger issues in this class. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers with John Garcia. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to play college football fantasy. Spice up your college weekend. It is so simple to do this while the games are going on. You don't have to invest a ton of time, do a ton of research. It's something that you can do on the fly as games are happening. Enjoy the action while you're watching the games. It allows you to take 2 to 5 players, stack them up, parlays. On our Discord, Mike always does this. And he'll come back. He'll take Mertz over 200 yards, Chimere DK plus 80 yards, and stack all those players together. And they don't even have to be on the same team. You can take a couple from Ohio State. You can take JJ McCarthy. You can take Braylon Allen and pair all these players up. It's a really fun way just to follow along with college football fantasy. Easy, quick payouts. No longer do you have to wait for the end of your fantasy football season to get a payout. You get paid out right after the weekend games. Nice and simple, easy to use. Available in over 30 states, and one of the simplest fantasy games to set up and get started with immediately. Very little learning curve, and the user feedback and the team on Underdog is incredibly easy to work with. If you have any questions, they reach out very quickly and solve those for you. And we have a great offer for you. Sign up with the promo code Locked On. That's one word. Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Free money. Deposit $100, get $100 free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com, find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store, Google Play Store. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On, one word. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. I want to thank everybody making Locked On Badgers one of your first listens of the day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Sports Today. It's from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, all in one show, only like Locked On can provide for you, only Locked On can deliver for you. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to bring John Garcia back onto the show, continue this awesome discussion. John, as always, I want to give people the opportunity. Where can they follow your really insightful work?
Yeah, real simple, si.com/college. And we're talking ball and recruiting every day on Twitter. John Garcia _JR is where you can find me there.
I love it, man. All right, Cole LaCrue. We've talked about a bunch. Quarterback recruiting, we've talked about a bunch. Cole's been on this show. He got his offer. 2023 quarterback out of Broomfield, Colorado. I want to talk mostly about how you feel his senior years progressed. What do you think of his game? Because we've talked about the need for quarterbacks quite a bit. Remind people what you like about his game.
Again, talk about modernizing Wisconsin football. This is the type of quarterback that can do it seemingly by himself, right? A pure athlete at the quarterback position who works almost at his best when he's off script. Now, it doesn't mean he's wild and reckless and all that stuff. I think just 10 interceptions as a high school quarterback, period, like over 3 years of varsity experience, which is a great number. But when you watch him at his best plays, Ryan, he's off script. He's scrambling. He's rolling to his left as a right-handed quarterback, pushing the ball to the second and especially the third level. There's a lot of 40-plus yard dots that he's putting on tape, which makes you start to pull away from that athleticism and just talk about him as a quarterback, right? This is a great thrower of the football, right? We don't talk about that enough at the quarterback position. And Cole does it stationary. He does it on the run. And he even does it almost especially interestingly to his weak side. He does it so well out of the pocket moving left that, again, he helps you compensate for lack of explosive playmakers on the outside, a lack of an elite offensive line or running game. He helps you blur the margins there. And if obviously I don't have to explain this, you look at the NFL, you look at great college football players, those MVP type quarterbacks, they do all those things. They blur all those margins. I mean, look at Caleb Williams at USC, totally banged up roster. I mean, it looks like he's out there by himself sometimes, but they're still winning. And he's still putting these great games together. And I think Josh Allen in the NFL makes up for so much because of that movement ability, the pressure he puts on a defense, and ultimately his arm and decision-making as a quarterback. And I think Cole does some of those things so very well. And you mentioned, what is he doing as a senior that maybe we hadn't seen as much in 2021? It's the production. Everything is up from completion percentage to efficiency to yards per play, yet the interceptions and the turnovers are down. So he's accounted for 34 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions to his name as a senior. I think they maybe start the postseason this week. They're undefeated at this point. So the most important stat, he is attaching himself to that as well. So the production has increased every year. The mistakes have decreased every single year. And there's just a complete control with Cole. So while there's this confidence in his right arm and a willingness to take some chances, it's not reckless. It's not to the point where you're worried like, hey, does this kid fit what Wisconsin wants to do in terms of ball control and playing good defense? Does he maybe turn it over too much? That answer is absolutely not. And I think that's part of the reason why Wisconsin finally jumped in with this scholarship offer. I know he's been waiting for it. I know your audience has certainly been waiting for it. You're relative to trying to find a quarterback here at the end of the cycle. And it looks like he could be that fit with the top 3 that he announced, right? Wisconsin, Colorado, the in-state school, as well as Tulane, which has had a great year down in New Orleans. You got to feel good about Wisconsin, right? I mean, Colorado's another school going through transition. There's not the same feel of everything's going to be the same, and it's just going to be a matter of tweaking as opposed to overhauling. Colorado feels like an overhaul. Wisconsin doesn't. So from a quarterbacking perspective, 1-to-1, you got to feel better about Wisconsin than the in-state school. So it becomes, the experience that he's had at Wisconsin and that long-standing relationship versus Tulane, kind of newer to the party, virtual visits. He's never been down there. How does that shake out before what we expect to be a pretty quick turnaround between announcing this top 3 and making a decision?
Yeah, I want to go back to one of the points you made, undefeated regular season. How much are you looking for, especially for a quarterback recruit? Are you looking for the 10-0 season, the winning culture? How much does that matter and how much does that translate?
I mean, normally it's hard to, pin that on a quarterback, but one of the theoretical knocks on LaCrue is, look, he's in Broomfield, Colorado, right? So he's not in Dallas, Texas, or Los Angeles, California. So I think it goes both ways here. While you can't put it all on the quarterback, as the competition, let's say, is questioned more and more, you do want to see more physical dominance, not only from a production standpoint, but at quarterback from a winning standpoint. So I think that box is huge for him being there. If he was in Houston or Dallas or Miami or LA and he was 5-5, you wouldn't even blink at it, because of the circumstances. But conversely, in Colorado, you're like, he needs to be winning games. I think putting it all together as he has as a senior and that final script is still TBD. It has been perfect. I mean, this is exactly what you want to see from a kid who has a chip on his shoulder, who knows he's under the radar, who knows that he went into his senior year without any Power 5 interest, much less offer, all of that stuff. You want to see that on top of it, because it's easy to look at the numbers and say, okay, well, other kids are out throwing him for sure. But when the winning is attached to it, which also in a lot of cases means he's not playing as much. He's got like 100 less pass attempts this year than last year, but he's got the same amount of touchdowns and more rushing production to his name to this point, which says that, look, they were up big in a lot of these games, and he was able to get a little bit of rest and become co-OC or cheerleader or whatever he wants to do when he's off the field. So again, those are important factors to look at when you look at a kid at his position, especially in Colorado, again, where it's never going to be the benefit of the doubt competitively. So you need to be dominant. If you're the lower you go, the more dominant you need to be. And Cole LaCrue has been exactly that as a senior.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rushing production, 13 rushing touchdowns this year. I believe it was the first 8, almost 7 or 8 games of the year, they almost KO'd every team. Like if there were mercy rules in place, they would have mercied them. I want to kind of finish up here with Cole. One of the things I thought was impressive watching this film, and we've watched Ryan Brown. On this show, we've watched Parker Leasy.
Yep.
Cole is throwing into tighter windows, and it's not a knock on anybody. You go back and look at Ryan Brown, especially in Florida, and it's not his fault, but he's throwing to receivers that have 3 or 4 steps on people a lot of times. Whereas LaCrue, to your point, isn't doing that. So he's already throwing into tighter windows. I'm curious, when you watch him on film, does that stick out to you? Maybe the accuracy, the ball placement a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said, as a senior, you start to marvel just at his decision making and throwing, as opposed to that total package of athleticism and off script and grit and running. That stuff is still there 1,000%. But as a senior, you could tell it's more like, hey, 3rd and 6, we need the ball right here, and the ball comes out right there, particularly outside the pocket, which is just it's routine at this point. It's going to get to the point, Ryan, where we don't talk about, oh, he throws well on the move, because that's going to be the standard. And Cole is already kind of at that standard where on the move, he is just as dangerous as a passer as he is when he's stationary and comfortable in the pocket. So that is maybe the biggest positive we see in his game. But as a thrower and as a passer, the windows are tight. The anticipation looks better in 2022, and the production again. I mean, he's hitting those marks, even though he's rushing for more production at the same time. When he is sitting in the pocket or outside, the ball's on the money. I mean, again, especially those 2nd and 3rd level throws, which is, as a Wisconsin fan, those are the ones that you're like, I need those. I need those. I mean, slants and digs and outs and bubble screens are great, but I need those deep comebacks, those over routes, those 9 shots, those 7-hole shots. Those are the throws we need to see kind of perfected here. And I think that's where Cole is most impressive. So again, modernizing at that position, if he's the guy, that's a step in my mind.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And I think we all feel like Wisconsin has a very good shot here going forward. I'm going to wrap up there with Cole. I want to get really briefly, we're coming back. We're going to talk about a powerhouse school in California that Wisconsin really just threw 11 offers out to. So I want to get your feel on this, get your take on this really quickly. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers with John Garcia. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens every single day. We got John Garcia Jr. on Sports Illustrated College Football Recruiting Insider, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. So Mater Dei, a name which I traditionally botch. I think I nailed it that time.
You got it.
Power. Obviously, we know anyone who follows college football knows that's one of the powerhouses. Wisconsin on Tuesday went out and made 11 offers between the 2024 class and the 2025 class. Now, that's atypical for Wisconsin in general. It's not something that they traditionally throw a bunch of offers out there. Other schools do more of that. What is your big takeaway here? Is there any player in particular Wisconsin's looking at, or is this just an effort to get more entrenched in a powerhouse school?
I think it's both. Again, we talk about the confidence in the staying power of this staff. So how about going to the number 1 high school in the country right now, Mater Dei, and offering only underclassmen in that pursuit? I think that's another pure indicator of confidence. And yeah, surely you want to splash at that school. There's, again, it's IMG, it's Mater Dei, it's St. John Bosco, it's St. Thomas Aquinas, it's, St. Francis Academy. These are the schools nationally that you want to have some type of influence at, if at all possible. And in order to have that influence, you have to go out and offer some kids. It's really simple. It sounds like. So doing it kind of in a package all at one time, I think is really smart. It caught headlines. I saw it. You obviously saw it. A bunch of people saw it. And you're just like, okay, I see you, Wisconsin, in that regard. So naturally, yeah, you want to splash there and have Wisconsin on the tongue a little bit for those high school players. But you also want to have an opportunity to land a kid or two if you can. So if I'm looking very early, much too early at some of those underclassmen, I'm going to look defense first, right? It's just more stable. It's more of what we know at Wisconsin. So I think Jelani Davis, the safety, who's starting to pick up momentum here, would make some sense for Wisconsin. He's just now breaching the Power 5 scholarships into him. So Wisconsin being one of those, I think is advantageous. And then Ramir Davis, the linebacker, he's a coverage kind of undersized linebacker. So a will type linebacker who really runs incredibly well, just now picking up FBS offers. So again, you talk about getting in early like we did with Alexander, or like we talked about with Alexander as the top or the first 2024 commitment. Now Ramir Davis all of a sudden becomes another one of those where you're not first, but you're among the first to jump in on him overall. And he's got a brother playing at USC. And now you have, tangibly jumped in here just as early as the Trojans have. So I think that kind of stuff is really interesting and smart from Wisconsin's perspective. So again, yeah, if you're going to go pull one out at Mater Dei, I'd probably lean on defense and probably the back 7 before I would go anywhere else. So yeah, keep an eye on Davis and keep an eye on or they're both Davis actually. So keep an eye on both Davises at this point, Ramir and Jelani at safety.
That's definitely a good point you made too. We'll finish up here. Just almost a strategic level of offer everyone at once, and you're going to generate headlines. Like there's no publicity is a bad thing, right? I guess Michigan State would argue with that at this point coming up, but that definitely generated headlines, and it felt like a strategic move to get in there and get on, like you said, the tongue of that program and those kids. So that was really interesting to me. John, as always, man, we are smarter because you stopped by. We always appreciate it. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll get you back on next week.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens every day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Sports Today on the Locked On Network. Get all the latest sports news, stories, all combined into one show, only at Locked On, wherever you find podcasts, wherever you find your YouTube shows. As always, thank you so much. On Wisconsin, and we'll talk tomorrow.